All right, so let's discuss the details that are coming through to us about how today's voting is going. I'm joined now by Grant Masterson from the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Grant, thank you so much for joining us. Let's deal with the most concerning issue, which is what's playing out at Tequini College in Durban at the moment. It seems some 400 people went to register on registration weekend, but there was load shedding. Their details were taken down manually. They say they're not on the voters' roll. Now there's a big standoff with the IEC. What are the options available when someone legitimately went to register and isn't on the voters' roll? What can the IEC do in a situation like that?
So the principle in the Electoral Act and in the Constitution is that as far as possible, a person should be given every right to cast their vote, and then you can sort out the legality and the technicalities of their right to vote at a later stage. So as far as is possible, given the unique circumstances we're talking about here, those 400 voters should be permitted to vote. And that has been standard practice in the past for the IEC to take their ballots. Now, you are perfectly entitled to store them separately to the point that you try and verify them en masse. Of course, it's very tricky when you try and verify individual votes one by one, because then the issue of privacy of the vote becomes an issue as well. So it's not an easy one, but as far as the Constitution and the Electoral Act is concerned, the voter does have the benefit of the doubt in most circumstances. Of course, we have to remember that these are the first elections which are placing a premium on the location where you vote because of the Constitutional Court judgment that was handed down previously in 2015. All voters have to vote within the ward where they live. And so this is a new requirement that does complicate matters. So those 400 voters also have to prove that they live in the district or the ward where they are trying to cast their ballot.
And then I have to ask you about what happened to Helen Zille of the DA. She was in Nelson Mandela Bay. She wasn't casting her vote, but as an elected official, she was monitoring a voting station in that area. And it seems that she was accused by ANC supporters of canvassing votes. She says she was simply speaking to people, asking if everything was going okay and asking them to be patient. We've got the footage, which we're going to play now again, of her being bundled out of this voting station by a police officer. And she's now laid a charge against IPID. What exactly are the rules? First of all, we understand it is okay for political parties to wear their party regalia. It's only the IEC that cannot show any party support. But what are the rules around that fine line between checking everything's okay at a voting station you're inspecting and canvassing? Grant, are you still with us?
Yes, so I mean, look, the issue with Helen Zille is very, very interesting, because we have a situation where the elected official, yes, Helen Zille is a formally elected official. She is the leader of a party, a very senior leader. I'd be very interested to know whether she had accreditation. I would presume that she does have accreditation to monitor the elections, and therefore she is entitled to be present there in the polling station. But of course, the presiding officer does have the right to ask any person who they feel is misbehaving in the polling station to leave, at which point we get these very unpleasant scenes. You never like to see this happening to the leaders of any political party or any member of a political party, because they have so much interest in what's going on at the stations themselves. This affects them directly. So it's a very, very unfortunate incident. If Helen Zille does have accreditation, she is, of course, bound by the code of conduct that all monitors, all observers are bound by, which is to not directly interfere in the process. And so it's up to the presiding officer at the station to make a determination. Should a person who's being disruptive be removed from the station if she's not prepared to to go voluntarily, then that's why we have SAPS at the polling station. But really, it should never come to this. There seems to be more to the story than we currently understand. It makes for an ugly spectacle on what has otherwise been an affirming day for our democracy, with people voting in orderly manner, with everyone's behaving themselves. So incidents like this are very unsavory. You never like to see this.
Absolutely. I want to talk to you about voter turnout. What is your sense of what it's going to be? Ipsos is concerned that it might be 40%, even lower. We know that I think in 2016 it was 58%, if I'm not mistaken, and the lowest ever for a local election has been 48%, and that was, I think, in 2000. What is your sense of voter turnout?
Yeah, it looks as though we're not going to have a high voter turnout. Certainly, it seems as though the enthusiasm that we saw in the last 2016 local government elections has waned. There are a number of factors to this I think we need to bear in mind. There is a good reason why the IEC plans for these elections midweek, because when you place a public holiday on a Monday, the temptation for a long weekend and for people to move away from their area where they are registered to vote. And of course, I remind you again that the law has changed, and you can now only vote in the place where you reside, because that is the law now. So the IEC checks your address, and that is the only ward within which you're allowed to vote. So if people have decided to head to the coast for a long weekend, maybe on the inland, or they're just taking a long weekend somewhere else, then that's of course going to lead to lower numbers. The other issue I do think that we're seeing is that there is increasingly a frustration with the choices on the ballot. The ANC has been struggling to get its voters to turn out, and we know that the ANC performs worse in local government elections than it does at national elections to get the vote out. So for whatever reason, being the dominant party, being the party with the largest number of voters who vote for it, the fact that the ANC doesn't manage to get these voters out will also likely suppress turnout. And of course, the issue is then which voters don't turn out and which voters do turn out, because those can cause dramatic swings in the results depending on who shows up and who doesn't.
Yes, absolutely. And voting still underway at this hour, so I guess we'll have to wait and see whether the weather, the tantalizing prospect of a long weekend away, and also just simple unhappiness with the voting choices has seriously impacted voter turnout. Grant Masterson, Head of Programs at the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa, thank you very much for your time. We've got more election news when we return.